Hey everyone, my name is Skylar Amon. I am an illustrator and author living in Portland, Oregon. I am also an affiliated artist with the Climate Science Alliance. My background is in drawing, printmaking, and bookbinding. I also studied creative writing in college and just published my first picture book called Lloyd Finds His Whale Song. For many years, I have made zines and hand-bound artist books that I filled with drawings, comics, painting, photography, poetry, and other writing. Today I want to show you a few simple ways you can make your own zines. So I am just going to go through a handful of my own zines to show you a few different formats and folding and binding techniques that you can use to create your own zines. The nice thing about making zines is that many of them can be made with typical household supplies that you might already have, like copy paper, thread, and glue sticks. Most of the ones I'm showing here are called pamphlet stitch books. They are bound together using a simple needle and thread, and they can have several pages nestled together to create an easy-to-read little book. One of my favorite types of zines is the 6-page mini book. Sometimes I call it a star fold because it kind of looks like a star as you fold it up. This is a really simple format that can be made from just one piece of paper. I will also be showing you how to make an accordion fold book, which has some really awesome possibilities for how you can lay out your image or your text. This last example is just kind of a fun one. I found this old book at a secondhand store and I altered it with collage, paint, words, and images to create a loose story or idea using the original book's underlying text as a starting place. Now, I wouldn't recommend using any valuable books, but it is a neat way to reuse existing materials and reduce waste, especially if the book would otherwise end up in the trash. So please stay tuned for the rest of my zine videos, where I will show you how to make a simple star fold mini book, the accordion fold, and the pamphlet stitch. Hi everyone! In this video, I'm going to show you how to make a pamphlet stitch zine. As you can see here, this style of zine has a simple thread binding along the spine. It is visible at the center of the book as well, and all the pages are nestled together in one section. So let's get started. You can use any type of paper, like regular copy paper or cardstock, whatever you like. Just make sure the paper doesn't get too thick, or it can make folding and binding a little bit harder. You can also use any size paper you want. Here I'm using 8.5 by 11 lightweight cardstock. Start with one sheet of paper and fold it in half. I'm using a bookbinder's tool called a bone folder to make sharp creases, but you can also use your finger or a ruler to make your creases. When you have a nice fold, you want to rip or cut along that crease. I'm using my bone folder to get a nice even tear. You can rip it against the side of a desk or use a ruler for that as well. You can even cut it if you'd like. Now you can fold and cut your pages as much or as little as you want. The important thing is that when folded in half, the paper in front of you is the size you want for the pages of your zine. I'm going to fold and tear up a couple more pieces of paper so my book has a few more pages. Once you have all your pages, simply set them on top of one another with all the folds in the center. Unless your paper is very thin, you probably don't want more than 8 sheets, or it starts to get a little bulky for the binding. Now we're going to create that binding. So open your pages to the center. We're going to put 3 holes here to sew through. You want them to be about evenly spaced, and maybe about an inch in from the top and bottom. Here's an example again of what the binding looks like when it's done. You can see the thread goes through the 3 holes at the center of all the pages. Now I'm using a special bookbinding tool here called an awl. It has a very sharp point on one end that pokes holes in paper to prepare for sewing. Please ask a grown-up for help if you use an awl. It is very sharp. You can also poke your holes with a needle if your pages are thin enough, or even use a push pin, safety pin, or other tool like that. I'm going to put 3 holes in the center of my book right on that fold. I like to space them evenly apart. You can measure this with a ruler or just eyeball it. I mark each hole with a small pencil mark so I know where to make my holes. I'm going to thread my needle here quickly so it's ready to go, and then I'm going to poke my holes. I push the awl through the holes at about a 45-degree angle. You can poke holes through each page individually, or you can do the whole stack at once as long as it's not too thick. If you do all the pages at once, sometimes the pages move around a bit, so try out what will work best for you. Now I'm putting my needle through the center hole on the outside of the book. I leave a few inches of thread so I don't pull it all the way through by accident. From the inside, go back out one of the other holes, it doesn't matter which one, and back outside. Now go through the opposite hole, the one you haven't sewn through yet, and pull your thread taut. From the inside, go back through the center hole. Make sure your thread is pulled tight, and then tie a double knot around the thread. Cut off the excess thread and you're all done. You have a completed, ready to go pamphlet zine. Hey everyone, and welcome to my accordion fold zine how-to video. All you need for this style of zine is a piece of paper, or more if you want a longer book, a glue stick, and a tearing or cutting tool. So to get started, take a sheet of paper and fold it in half lengthwise. You want to have long strips of paper to make your accordion. I'm using an 8.5 by 11, so it's easiest to just fold it longwise and cut it into 2 long strips. But if you have a different dimension of paper, just keep in mind you want long strips. The size and length doesn't really matter, that's totally up to you. Once you have your strips, take one and fold it in half. Then fold in toward the middle to create equal panels. Depending on the length of your strips, you may want to fold more or less than I am here. Each of these folded panels will be one page in your accordion zine. Open your strips and refold them to make sure each fold is alternating. By that, I mean it should look like a zigzag shape or like an accordion. If you're just working with one long strip, you're basically done already, and you can skip the next step, which is gluing your strips together. This is pretty handy if you're working with smaller size papers, like 8.5 by 11 printer paper like I am, and you want to create a longer strip from multiple pieces of paper. So all I'm going to do here is go to the last panel of one of my strips and apply glue to it. I'm using a glue stick, but you can use other glues as well. And I'm just going to put down the first panel of my other strip on there and adhere them together. I use my bone folder to kind of rub over that and make sure that glue is adhered really well and that it's nice and flat. But you can also just use your hand, you can use the side of a ruler or even a pencil. You just want to make sure it's attached nice and straight and that it's pretty flat and free of bubbles and wrinkles in the paper. And that's it. You just fold up your accordion zine and you're ready to go. And the cool thing about this style of zine is that you can work on both sides of the paper to make a long book that wraps around from one side to the other, or even make 2 stories in one. And you can play with the format and have a really long horizontal or a really long vertical format as well. And that's it for the accordion fold. Thanks for tuning in. Hi folks, let's make some zines. Here are some basic tools you can use to create your zine. A ruler, a pair of scissors, a bone folder, and a pencil. A bone folder is a special bookbinder's tool. You can get one in an art or craft store or online. They are really helpful for folding and tearing paper, but if you don't have one, that's okay. You can use your hands or a ruler or a pair of scissors. Okay, so I want to show you how to make a simple star fold book. I also call this a mini book sometimes because I use one piece of paper and make small pages. I'm using an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, but you can use any paper you'd like. Just make sure it's not too thick so you can fold it easily. Take your sheet of paper and fold it in half longwise. If you have a bone folder, you can make a sharp fold, or you can just press your fold with your fingers. Open the paper and fold it in half again, this time on the short side. Now open it again and fold the two ends in to your middle crease. Now open the paper and lay it flat on your cutting mat or whatever your surface is. I'm drawing these lines onto my folds here just so you can see them clearly in the video. You don't need to do this on your own. You can see the two sections in the middle that I've marked with my pencil. You're going to want to cut along those two sections. I use a razor blade, which is a very sharp tool, and you should ask a grown-up for help if you're using this. You can also make this cut with any utility blade or a pair of scissors if you don't have anything else. You can even rip it sometimes if you're really careful. Just make sure not to cut all the way to the ends of the paper, just along those two middle sections. Once that is cut, go ahead and pull it open. See how it kind of looks like a star or a diamond? Fold it into that X shape and lay it flat so you can make your creases nice and sharp. Now close it up and you have a little book. The first page is the cover, and then you can just open it page by page until you get to the back. I've labeled it here so you can easily see where the pages are when it's open flat. And with this in mind, you can plan what content you want on each page, or you could flip the piece of paper over and make another hidden book inside. And that's all it takes to make the mini book with the star fold. Thanks a lot, guys. In this video, I want to talk about how to create ideas and make content for a climate-themed zine. To start, find a topic or current event that interests you. It could be a news article about a specific event that is happening. It could be an animal that is facing extinction whose story interests you. It might even be something happening in your local community, like a new recycling program or a beach cleanup, or a plan developed by your city to reduce pollution. You might find yourself drawn to positive stories that celebrate environmental wins, or you might want to make a zine about something that upsets you or that you think shouldn't be happening. Whatever feelings or ideas you want to explore are completely valid. The beauty of a zine is that it represents your perspective and your feelings. It's your art. So pick something that you care about and inspires you to write, draw, or otherwise create some type of content for a zine. For purposes of this video, I'm going to make a very simple zine about plastic pollution and its effect on the ocean. One of the things I have found very upsetting over the last few years is hearing stories about scientists finding single-use plastic in some of the deepest parts of our oceans. This is an evidence-based concept, so I did a little research to find these articles to refresh my memory about the details. You are welcome to make your zine about facts like these, or you can focus on your emotions and other perspectives you want to share. Some people definitely make factual zines intended to spread awareness or get information into people's hands. Other folks make zines that are more artistic and might tell a fictional story or even a personal story. They might interpret their idea through poetry or collage or even just use images. Any technique that appeals to you is the perfect way to create your zine because it's true to you. I decided to use the accordion fold format because I want to tell the story of the deep sea, and I thought it would be cool to create a really long vertical format that shows all the way from the surface of the sea to the deepest depths. You might want to do something similar if you think a certain type of book format fits your idea best. A pamphlet stitch book usually has more pages, so if you want to create a lot of content, that might be a good fit. A Starfold mini book has 6 pages and is a creative format for a quick read or one that you want to tuck into a pocket or somewhere small. So experiment with various formats and make your zine unique. There's really no wrong way to do it. If you want to reproduce your zine on a copy machine, keep in mind that many printers only print 8.5 by 11 easily. Some print shops will print bigger sizes but can cost a little more. If you're using a pamphlet stitch, you might want to copy or scan all your pages before you sew or staple it together. Likewise for the accordion, if you are gluing a few pieces together, make sure to copy or scan your individual pieces of paper first. It will save you a lot of time and effort when you want to make copies of your zine. If you want to make one unique zine, that's totally fine too. I sometimes like to use paint or collage elements that don't reproduce as well. In that case, you end up with one really interesting zine that people can interact with and experience all the textures and components you added. It's also a really cool way to reuse recycled papers or incorporate old magazines and newspapers or old wrapping papers or decorative paper that you might otherwise throw away or not have a use for. So now I want to quickly go through how I created my zine. You don't have to follow my process. In fact, you'll probably find a style and process you like even better. This is just to show you how I work and to hopefully inspire some ideas for you. So I started with a basic accordion fold zine using just 2 sheets of 8.5 by 11 paper. I sketched out a few key ideas I wanted to include in the zine about depths and zones of the ocean, as well as some of the animals that live in those regions. Then I moved to my actual zine and quickly sketched out the basics right on the zine itself. This included a title. I'm calling my zine Deep Sea Plastics, along with ocean depths, creatures, and a bunch of plastic debris. I went through this pretty quickly, only for purposes of keeping this video short, but you can take as much time as you want or need to include whatever details or elements are important to you. At this point, I used ink pens to go over my rough sketches. I wanted to finalize the sketches with a little more detail, but I also wanted you to be able to see it more clearly on the video. Feel free to use any materials you want for your zine. That could be pencil, paint, markers, or other art supplies. To make this zine, I used pencils, a white eraser, and a few art pens. These 2 brands are called Microns and Faber-Castell Pitt pens. I like these because they are waterproof, so when I add my watercolor, it doesn't make the ink run. But you can use any art supplies you like. I also use some Payne's Gray watercolor and a cheap watercolor brush. Now that I have the basic concept inked onto the zine, I'm going to use a little watercolor to highlight the dark depths of the sea. You could use as many or as few colors as you want, or you could keep your zine in black and white. Black and white is really popular in zine making because it makes it easier and cheaper to reproduce on a copy machine. But I'm just making one copy of my zine today for fun. Once I was done inking and painting my zine, I let it dry. Because of the watercolor, the lightweight paper got a little wrinkled. This is common with paints, glue, and collage. You can use thicker paper to minimize this a bit. In this case, once my zine was dry, I placed it under a few heavy books to press it flat. This can help with buckling and wrinkling in the paper. Just make sure your zine is completely dry before you press it. Otherwise, the pages may stick together. So here's my completed zine. To recap, I started with an idea that I care a lot about, which is ocean plastics. Then I did some research to see what scientists are saying and finding on this issue right now. Once I'd brainstormed lots of ideas, I settled on the accordion style zine to illustrate the depths of the ocean. Then I sketched out my ideas in my sketchbook and started working in pencil right on my zine. Once the pencil work was done, I inked it using waterproof pens and added watercolor for a bit of detail and contrast. Once my zine was totally dry, I pressed it under a few heavy books to get a crisper, flatter book. Now my zine is done. Good luck creating your own climate-themed zines, and remember, the most important part of making zines is to have fun, be creative, and share your own perspective. Thank you so much, everyone.